All right, about a week and a half ago, the National School Boards Association wrote a letter to President Biden saying, quote, a growing number of threats of violence and acts of intimidation occurring across the nation are being directed at school board members. NSBA believes immediate assistance is required to protect our students, school board members, and educators who are susceptible to acts of violence affecting interstate commerce because of threats to their districts, families, and personal safeties. It's actually a pretty long letter. But in this letter, it goes on to say, and these acts of malice, violence, and threats against public school officials have increased. The classification of these heinous actions could be the equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism and hate crimes. And when they categorize these so-called threats and different things, and I mean, they call for everything. I mean, they want the Patriot Act used. They want the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. They want an executive order to enforce all applicable federal laws for the protection of students and public school personnel. And then they start to list the things that have happened. School board meetings have been disrupted in California, Florida, Georgia, and other states because of local directives for mask coverings to protect students and educators from COVID-19. Well, yeah, I guess so. There was an individual arrested in Illinois for aggravated battery and disorderly conduct during a school board meeting. Who did he batter? Didn't say. During two separate school board meetings in Michigan, an individual yelled. He yelled about the mask requirements. And that prompted the school board to recess because, actually, this was another case. An individual prompted the board to call a recess because of opposition to critical race theory. In New Jersey, Ohio, and other states, anti-mask proponents are inciting chaos during board meetings. Wow. They're actually calling these school board members names. So we need a federal task force, which is what the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, issued last week in a memo. Well, 60 members of Congress are saying, what's up? We're against violence, but where's the evidence that criminal activity is actually taking place? Joining me now to talk about this is Montana Congressman Matt Rosendale. He signed on to the letter. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me on, Tony. Good to be with you tonight.
So in the letter, you and your colleagues have asked Attorney General Garland to answer 5 questions by November the 15th. For you, what is the question you most want to see answered?
I want to see by what authority does the federal government step in and start intervening on the communications that are taking place between parents and school districts in areas that he has no supervision over. I mean, by what authority have we now brought the Department of Justice into the local school districts to basically intimidate parents from getting involved in what their children are going to be taught? It's very disturbing and troubling to me.
Yeah, and his memo and even this letter from the National School Boards Association seems to lack the evidence to suggest such federal actions are required. In fact, in the memo, the Attorney General says we've got to explore how we can do this because we don't have the authority under federal law to do this.
Exactly. This is clearly a matter for local law enforcement. If someone is getting out of hand at a meeting, then that is exactly what they are there for. But if the board members themselves have conducted the affairs in such a fashion that they have elevated the anxiety and the angst at these meetings, that the parents of these students are speaking a little bit louder to try and get their point across, I really don't think that that is a matter for local law enforcement, and certainly not a matter for the FBI to go in and start investigating. From where I sit, what this looks like is just another tactic of the Biden administration to completely silence and intimidate those who might question what they're trying to do. And I don't think that there's a more important obligation for parents than to make sure that they are involved in how their children are being educated and what they're being taught.
I agree with you, Congressman Rosendale. I think this is typical leftist tactics of intimidation. They use the government to intimidate. Now, look, these are, and you point this out, I believe, in the letter, these are public servants. They should respond to parents who pay taxes. Now, I believe parents should conduct themselves in a civil way, but what they're doing is they're taking a couple of examples and they're hiding behind that with the hope of using the federal government to intimidate parents into silence so they can continue the indoctrination of children.
Absolutely, they are. I mean, even law enforcement officers go through training so that when they come into a situation that they are taught how to decrease the energy and anxiety that's taking place there so that you don't have something break out and get worse. And if the folks who are conducting these meetings are doing it in such a fashion that, again, that they elevate the problems that are taking place, if they don't allow people to speak, if they basically ignore the comments that the parents are trying to make, whether it's about critical race theory or any other curriculum that's being introduced to their children. We've seen in the state of Montana where the school districts were starting to introduce some sex education programs that were too explicit, quite frankly, for kindergartners and first graders. And the parents had to go in and make sure that this curriculum was changed. And so they have to have that right. They have to have that ability. And if there's something that is going wrong, that someone is getting too boisterous or out of line, that is what local law enforcement is for, but not the FBI. They should not be called in. And this is an intimidation tactic. And quite frankly, with the language that was inserted into that letter, from the School Boards Association, I would like to know who helped them prepare that. Who gave them that language that starts talking about the interstate commerce clause and information that would give them the ability to try and draw the FBI and the Department of Justice into this whole situation?
That is really a good question, and I hope if you have an opportunity to question the Attorney General, that's one that's asked. Congressman, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Tony. Good to be with you.